Hey, what's up everybody? Rob here from Ram Studio Comics. Welcome back. So in today's live stream, I'm going to start it off with, hey, what's up Eric? Good to have you here. I'm going to start it with these two pictures and get your guys' feedback before I work on this project any further. We can either work on this, you can ask questions about how I would design something like this, how I'd work through something like this, or if you guys all concur and say, hey, we want to do something else, let's draw something, then we'll segue and draw something, whatever. You guys run the live stream, right? I'm just here to draw pretty pictures, or at least I think they're pretty. So we got a few people here already. What's up? Hello, how you doing? Appreciate you guys stopping by. That's awesome. So I got these two pictures going, and this is just something I face sometimes as an artist, so I wanted to share it. I oftentimes will draw through something. I take a character that I'm inspired to do, and Spider-Man is a big inspiration for me. I just love the character, and I start drawing it, and then I started with the one on the left, and actually even before the one on the left, there was a previous sketch to that. And as I got to about the point you see it there, I started to think, well, it just doesn't feel very dynamic, very energetic. Let me try something else. And then I worked on the one on the right. But then it made me think maybe I should get some more, insight from other people, some fresh eyes on it. So I'd like to know what you guys think about them. Which one you like. Just kind of comment real quick, and we'll start there. And then you guys can let me know what you want to do. If you want to draw on some of this, do you want to learn about some background stuff? Do you want to see me render out some of the work here? Or do you want to just sketch out some ideas entirely new? What are you guys looking for? What's up to Brazil? Good to see you. A lot of people jump in. Appreciate that very much. So what do you guys think? Is there, hopefully the audio is good. We didn't do an audio check, did we? Hello? Is anybody out there? Okay, the second one looks more pleasing. Okay, so now we got 2 for the one on the right. So you guys must be hearing me because you're starting to comment back. Okay, so we got 2 for the one on the right. Let's see where it goes. I like the one on the right, but maybe legs because it looks like he's kneeling. Okay. Yeah, the legs are a little bit quirky in that pose. I was going for that weird kind of, Spider-Man thing where he's all contorted and kind of wild. All right, we got 1 for the left, and I think that makes 6 for the right now, 7 for the right. Okay, so far it's predominantly leaning towards the one on the right. Yuri asks, how do you color illustrations? I don't know if we'll be able to get into that in this particular one. I do need to set up a live stream for that. I do have a video getting ready to come out where I show some of the coloring, but it's really just dropping the flat base colors. I always pick a mid-tone, and then I paint highlights and darker tones from whatever mid-tone I pick. I'll really need to do a separate live stream just for that, Yuri, so I can help explain that better. Okay, so a lot of the ones are coming in for the one on the right, and honestly, that's the one I like. But I see elements of each one that I like, and elements of each one that I don't like. But the one on the right, I feel is a little bit more dynamic and feels more like Spider-Man to me. But I did notice when I posted these that some people were, digging the one on the left as well. So I'll probably finish them both out, but. Now let me ask you guys this so we can get started. What would you like to see me do? This is actually just a JPEG of it. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that now. And then as I go to this is actually the actual art file that I'm working on. We can either work on this and I can explain some of the process, or if you guys want to see something drawn, then we can draw on something, specific or whatever. We can draw poses, we can draw some anatomy samples, whatever you guys want to get into. Or do you want to just see me work on this with all my messy layers I get going here? And while I'm waiting for the response, I'm going to sip some coffee, if you don't mind. Thank you, Tim Hortons. Thank you. This live stream has been sponsored by Tim Hortons. No, it hasn't. I just really love Tim Hortons. I'm going to give them a free shout out. I got like coffee cups and protein shakes all over my desk. I look like a bunch of bodybuilders got together to study for exams or something. Okay, beginning to the end process, how you got that far. And let's go for drawing something. That's a tough one, but kind of want to see the end game with this one. Yeah, and I don't know how far we'll be able to get into this, but, I could just explain portions of what I do. Like, for instance, at this stage, as I zoom in here, I'm pretty much ready to start rendering. I've dropped in all my line weight, and I would take off my perspective rollers, and I would start dropping in the darker tones of Spidey's suit. So if you guys want to see that, I can show you how I kind of designate those areas and start blocking them in and figure out where the light source is. Or we can just draw something entirely different, like poses or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But I just want to give you guys the option. So when you come to these live streams, this isn't like, hey, watch another one of my videos. This is like, how do I show you what you want to learn? And like the one comment said, we'll get to doing some colors real soon. Not in this particular episode, but real soon. How do you get the ideas on what to draw? I start off with very rough sketches. I try to think about whatever it is I'm going to draw, moving into it. But I start off with a very rough sketch. So like for this particular pose, I knew that the other one felt like it was too static, too boring, for me anyways, or what I was going for. So what I wanted to do is try to really stretch the bounds of, or the realms of what Spider-Man could do. So when I draw a pose like that, I'll just kind of do it again just to show you kind of where I started with it. I want to think very loose of the character. So for instance, if I'm going to do that, I might, I kind of place the head, even though I've heard a lot of artists say that's really not where you should start. I do kind of start with the head. But with Spidey, it's like, where are the shoulders for me? I guess that's always the trickiest part. We always think of shoulders like this. Like, there's the shoulders, there's the center of the collarbone, where they meet to the sternum or whatever. And that's only one very short range, or, one particular pose. The shoulders have a lot of range of movement, and you really see that with a character like Spider-Man. So what I did when I started was, I did something like this, like a real big V, and I pictured one shoulder closer, one back. I'll just do a different pose altogether. And then I immediately wanted this hand to come out towards the camera, so I kind of started with that. I'll do these like little spiral, for the fingers or whatever coming out, and I'll figure out a rough hand pose. But I typically feel like if I stay very rough at this stage, it's better. Like, I don't want to draw anything that looks like too much like a hand or too much like an arm. I'm actually trying to throw it in with shapes that are really crudely represented, so that I'm only focusing on the idea. So let me try to quit talking and actually explain it, because I generally do better when I'm not talking for some reason. So let's say that I'm trying to push the pelvis way back here, one leg coming up and out. So I'll do this curve for the upper leg. And then, I don't know where I want to put this other leg. Let's just say down and back. So again, I'm trying to throw these in with very crude shapes, just so I can even see if this idea is going to work before I get into, say, drawing an arm or drawing a head or a face. I don't want to think about those details yet. Like, even for the face, I just go, where's it pointed? Something really simple and really quick, so that I can work out any problems. Like, somebody pointed out to me recently about, they're like, well, you get this. It was that Wolverine pick, and they were like, the head doesn't look like he's looking where he's attacking. And I thought, wow, it was a good call. I didn't see that. It's kind of what led me to do this video. I'm like, well, maybe I should start showing you guys my work before I finish it. But it was like, it was a good call. It made sense. So like, for instance, if Spidey's shooting a web out like this, and it's very dimensional because of the position of his hand, so we got to think about that perspective and have the webbing get really large. Maybe he should be looking where he's shooting, right? He wouldn't be looking in the other direction. So just little things like that can be signified with just that cross section. for now, so that if you really itemize the work like that and simplify it as much as possible, you're going to get a lot more out of it. And you're also going to go, I don't like where that's heading. Let me veto this right now and go to something else. But if you spend too much time like doing this perfect arm over here, and then you realize this pose wasn't working, then you're really eliminating. You're wasting a bunch of time basically. So I kind of think this one might look like a good pose, and then at this point I would just start roughing in and figuring out the shapes of a little bit more. One thing I've been trying to do lately though is study anatomy, but then exaggerate it a lot, like really stylize. You see how I put this sweeping line right here for the leg, really stylizing the anatomy. I know that a basic leg, the muscle comes down the middle, this comes down to the side, they're like teardrops, but I don't want to illustrate every line like that. Kind of skip some parts and just exaggerate a few of the curves. I think that will give you a nicer look usually, but depends on what style you're going for, as well. Okay, let me read through a couple of these. Let's see what we got here. Could you try cross-hatching on this drawing? Yeah, we could probably do that. Do you ever work in Procreate? Could do a tutorial on the basics. Yeah, I've got a lot of Procreate videos. I think I got to scroll back. I think I missed a bunch of these. Let's see. Okay, you guys were talking about shading. Yep, I got to... if you go to the main page of the YouTube channel and you go into the search bar, make sure to type in some of these because there's a lot of things that I've already covered. I've got like 400 videos or something crazy. I don't know, but make sure to check that out. And keep in mind too, I do have courses. If you're looking for more in-depth studies on whatever, like for instance, I just released a course. Forgive me, I got to do this shameless plug real quick so I get it out of the way. But I did just release a new course on Udemy. There's a link in the description box below, and it's for how to draw dynamic comic book superheroes. And I try to cover a lot of stuff that's all collectively about that topic. And you guys are welcome to leave an honest review and ask for new content to be added, and I'll make sure to cover it because that's going to be an ongoing course where there's just so much to cover when it comes to drawing comics, and I'm going to get into like lots more that's already been covered, but different poses, and there's a lot on creating dynamic poses with foreshortening and all this stuff. So make sure to check that out if you want. But again, go to the front page of the YouTube channel, search in that search bar, and you'll probably find something close to what you're asking for. And if not, make a request, and I'll do my best to get it on the list for my new videos. And somebody said ignored. Forgive me if I'm not catching it. I don't have a moderator on here. I probably should, but sometimes these come in pretty quick and I can't read them all. So I didn't mean to ignore you if that's what you're saying there. All right. So yeah, so this pose, it's pretty crude, but that gives me what I need to get started. And then I generally will just soft erase, and actually this always lags on this one. Let me just tone down the opacity, add another layer over top, and then start to kind of show you how I would refine even something like this, because this is pretty crude, but you don't need much to get started. You just need kind of a base idea, and then you want to get used to just drawing through it and making some pretty significant changes. I think the better you get at that, the more you're able to produce books, and the more fun you'll have with it. You start to lighten up on yourself and not worry about everything being so entirely perfect. And generally with speed, you're going to get more expressiveness in your work. That's why gesture drawing is so important, because you start to realize that the loose sketch portion of your work generally has the most energy, and you want to try to retain that as you complete the work. That's actually one of the harder things for me to do. I'll find my work tensing up as I render it, or cross-hatch it, add cross-hatching, things like that. What I've been trying to do more with the shoulders too is the shoulders actually come right off the body, especially with a character like Spider-Man. They'll stretch right away from the chest. So that's another way you can kind of make it feel more dynamic, is really draw the shoulders lifting up and away from the main portion of the upper torso. instead of so condensed and connected to it. They have again, a huge range of movement, and a character like this really showcases that. And like the hand was entirely the wrong size, wrong place. I just gotta move stuff like that around as I go. That's funny. Someone just said, which Comic-Con trailer did you enjoy more, Shazam or Aquaman? I just literally watched both of those yesterday. And actually, I would say, I didn't like either one of them. I would say Aquaman. I liked Aquaman, especially towards the end of the trailer I watched. They started showing more of the effects and the colorization. It started looking more like a Marvel movie. And I know it sounds bad, but it's like I started to like that. I like the bright colors. I like I was literally thinking when I was watching it, God, they need to make this look like Avatar, if that's even possible. But that kind of feel, by the end of the trailer, I started to see a lot of elements of that. And I think that would make a character like that and a narrative like that really sing. But at first I thought they were going with the dark gothic thing again, or the dark eerie DC thing that they do, and I really hope they don't. They gotta get better at making it light, airy, and fun. You captivate. I just like movies, but I don't know what I'm talking about here. I'm just throwing stuff out there. But you captivate a larger audience, I think. Doesn't become just for the adults. You want to think like Disney. They make sure to have something in there for everybody. And where DC, it's a lot of their movies, it seems like they end up going really dark and gritty, and they just fall flat. It's really strange, but whatever. I'm not trying to hate. I'm glad they're just making movies of these characters. I would go. I don't know that I missed any of them. It's like they're all awesome. So I'm just happy that they're making these movies of superheroes. It's pretty sweet. Some fighting dynamic poses. Yeah, we could try that. And these comments are coming in pretty quick. I'm going to miss some of these, and some of them look a little bit longer winded. I can't read that fast. I just can't. Could you make some lessons about drawing backgrounds? Yep, I'll get that on the schedule. And I mean, even here, I'm trying to look at the comments and see how many people chime in on a specific thing. But if you guys want, we could do like a little bit of work on the background back here. I could detail a building. Or we could do the fight poses. So how about you guys comment on those two? Narrow it down a little bit. Yeah, and I'll quit detailing this one because this is an entirely different pose than what I brought to the table. I just wanted to show you kind of how I would rough through it and get an idea down, pretty quickly. But we could go back to detailing this one or whatever. Actually, did I did the suit wrong, didn't I? I did. That is not correct. Man, his suit always throws me off on this part. It comes up, over, and around, but the top is webbing. So yeah, this part is wrong on the forearm. It goes around this way, doesn't it? Yep, I'm going to need reference. I always forget where this part ends up. Because I think the back of his arm is webbing, right? Because the bicep's always blue. Yeah, where does that go? Alrighty. I forgot where I should have my reference out and ready to go. And I don't. I have a pinup of Justice League sitting off to the side. Awkward. All right, there's another one for backgrounds. Yeah, detail the building. Yeah, let's do that since I can't remember where that blue ends up right there. That's so embarrassing since I draw Spidey all the time. But it's weird because there's some, I think it just ends up like this. That doesn't look right though. And then all this would be the webbing. Wow. Yeah, let's go ahead and detail that building. I'll figure that out later. So with the buildings, this is a 3-point perspective. Let me show you how, case you're not familiar with Sketchbook Pro, how this works. So I established the 3-point perspective somewhere. There they are. So I got these really far out. So those are 3 vanishing points for a 3-point perspective. And what I'll do is I'll detail this building right here. So what I like to do is actually separate the background from the foreground, or the character from the background, I should say. And let's get the background here. Let's bring this up above that blue, because that screen layer, that blue layer, actually represents a blue line. The stupid thing will not move up here. Why is it doing that? All right, there we go. Okay, so now we've got our 3-point perspective. And in this particular building here, I guess I'll do a little bit of this one too, so we can get a true 3-point perspective going. So you can see these lines converge down and back to the lower right. These ones converge down into the lower left. And these ones converge up to the top. And that's how we get our 3-point perspective. And everything we draw is going to converge to those 3 points. And I'll be honest, like whenever you do this, you really have to play around with where these points go. And you also have to take photos and trace through them, especially for buildings and perspective, so that you can understand what a correct perspective looks like. Because it's real easy to get wrong and just have a skewed perspective. It's not a bad thing, it's, you know, because you can make a skewed perspective look pretty cool with a lot of detail and rendering. But I think that you want to first understand the way things really are, and then you want to skew it, not the other way around. So with this, you see I've kind of got this line coming up the middle, and it's a bit messy, so I'll erase some of this back. So let's do that first. And take this off and just soft erase some of this back. But what I'll actually do with these buildings is I'll draw in freehand first, or I'll, you know, get some baselines in place to establish the perspective. But I'll draw in some freehand details like this. I'll just kind of scribble them in place. You can see that's what these rough lines are. I already started, like I was picturing a cross up at the top here, like it's a church, something like that. And then I'll detail some of this. I'll throw in some different edge work. One of the things I do is I try to draw in the perimeter shapes first, so the very edges. So I'll do something like this. Think about what the wedges might look like. And I'll go in and out of the edge work. I won't just keep straight lines everywhere, because it'll make for a very boring looking structure. So they don't have to be overly advanced. You could just use multiple like stages of trim. So put a few lines together in succession. You know, maybe a larger ledge right there. Drop shadow here to showcase that larger ledge. Maybe some little curved lines like this to signify, you know, like those little bricks that would be under the ledge, that kind of thing. And then instead of just having everything come square, you can add in some radiuses to the edge work like that. Little tricks like that tend to make it look more impressive. And you see, I didn't really do much. It's not like it took me a ridiculous amount of time to do that. So right now I'm just focusing on cutting into the building and making some larger defined shapes. And then as I think about the reset, I'm thinking about the recess of the building. So like right here, these are raised and these are recessed. So the X is raised, the O is recessed. And it doesn't look like that now, but that's what I'm thinking. So as I do these divides, that's what I'm keeping in mind. And then I want to think about, okay, if this is receding into space, there's going to be a drop shadow in here, something like that. And then what's inside there? Is it maybe an arch or something? So I draw like a little arch. And generally arches, when they're receding into something, you're not going to get the full arch. So a common mistake is to draw it like this, right? But that's not right, because it's inset. So you're going to lose one side of that based on perspective. So I don't even know if I put that on the right side, but I think I did. And then you could do like another shadow on this side of this ledge or ridge. Yeah, and I think that's right, because we're seeing this side of the building. So yeah, that's right. So that tells us what side to put the shadow on. Since we can see this side of the building, we're going to see this side of the ledge. Hopefully you understand that. Are you guys getting this? Because I don't explain perspective a lot, so I want to make sure you guys are understanding it. Let's see. Why not drawing perspective grid before drawing the buildings? Yeah, good point there. That and I cannot say that name, forgive me, but But a really good point. Why not draw the perspective grid first? And you can do that. But what I find that happens for me anyways, and this we're all different, you know, as far as what we adhere to and what we like and what we don't. I feel like the perspective grids get really like hard for me to see through. I do like drawing them in with different colors. That sometimes works. Like if I use like a light blue for one vanishing point, a light green for another, a light red, whatever. But I tend to find that it confuses me. Even this looks a bit confusing, and this may look confusing to you because you're not used to looking at the way that I draw perspective, but for me this makes sense. So, but you are making a good point. Like if you struggle doing it this way, you can draw the perspective lines out first. That's actually what these little gray lines are right here for me. I'm drawing those were done in perspective, but the reason I'm drawing freehand now is because I want a looser, energetic feel to the work. And even though architecture is, you know, appears to be like more structured and rigid, and it is in a lot of ways, it's still very designed, you know, with organic shapes. Like that's what I'm trying to show you here. Like instead of boxing everything in, you have to think about certain areas being arches and ridges and ovals, and you know, like instead of putting a square window up here, put like a half moon shape. But even though that half moon shape still works perspectively in a rectangle, that's how you're going to get it to look correct. So I don't know if that's making sense to you, but basically that's why I draw freehand at first, because I'm trying to get a more organic feel to the architecture, and then when I go back and refine it, I'll use the perspective rulers right here, and I'll tighten everything up. And I'll actually even, the more I seem to get more confident at backgrounds, the less I seem to need these. So it just seems to be happening naturally, but it's something I've noticed that I don't use them as much as I used to. I'm starting to see through it a bit more. And I found an artist on YouTube that does like these amazing backgrounds entirely freehand. I wish I knew his name. I'd have to look it up. Maybe I'll share it in the description of the video, but does these amazing architectural renderings entirely freehand. And it's just, so it's very doable. You just have to get, you know, you got to do more and more of it till it becomes second nature. Yeah, so somebody says, I never thought of drawing perspective rulers with the different colors. Yeah, I saw that. I want to say I saw that in a David Finch video. And then Mongo Studio actually does it inherently. You can actually set it to just make each one of those perspective grids a different color. But they don't do it in the way that I like to see them. Like I do like to draw them out nice and even, or perspectively receding into space. So like, excuse me. Like when I do these, I sometimes will, even though I don't do them that often, but I'll sometimes draw them back where they're actually getting tighter as they recede back into space. So it helps me visualize that. But again, I just tend to find it better to define the outer region of the building, you know, the space it's occupying like this, and then working into the shape. So I'll get like the main segments or separations of the building in place. And then I'll turn this off and go in and start drawing the details of it. Hold on, let me get a drink here. Okay, would you recommend using sketchbooks, perspective tools for drawing perspective views? I don't understand that question. Yeah, these are the perspective tools for Sketchbook Pro, and I recommend them. They work really well. But when you're saying perspective views, are you saying without buildings, just with people? Do you use reference for buildings or just make stuff up? Especially when in a particular city like New York or Gotham City or London, since the architectural has a different feel and diversity. Yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend reference for buildings. Buildings and cars, I would say, are the two most used areas within my own artwork, and I would say even within a lot of artists' artwork, where reference is used. In fact, I've noticed in a lot of comics, they'll actually trace buildings and then stylize over top. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing. I'm not going to point anybody out on that. It's actually, I think it makes sense in a lot of ways, especially when deadlines are, so tough in that industry. And, the characters are the focal points and the energy of the story. And don't get me wrong, the backgrounds play a huge role in telling the narrative. But what I'm saying is like how you just mentioned, if it's New York City, wouldn't you want it to look like New York City? Yes, so you would pull reference, and you're going to want to look at that reference. Now, if you can still stylize it in your own way, but there's certain things you want to pay attention to. Like, one of the things I notice, if I don't look at some reference, I'll get overly repetitive with the way that I draw things. Like even this brickwork right here. I might do this on every building or something. That's going to look silly. So I got to remember to really change it up. One thing that you can do too is just add like little, let me see if I can do one of these without slaughtering it. But these little like peaks and, designs to the corners instead of just making it a corner. That's kind of the same thing I was trying to point out with the edge work over here. But there's lots of things you can do to change the silhouette of it. And that really goes a long ways. In fact, one of the things that I think is helpful is when you're drawing to purposely draw some of this in a silhouette and see what it looks like. Because if it doesn't work as well as a silhouette, then it's probably not even going to work as well with detail and rendering. You gotta think about the silhouette that's there. So it's a good little practice exercise for you. Is that a church on top of the skyscraper? I don't know. I'm trying to just draw on some building details that are interesting to look at. I don't know if that's actually what's going to end up in this particular piece, because this is more like it has elements of a skyscraper or a housing structure. I don't know, but I'm just trying to vary up a few different details, so hopefully it'll spawn some interest for some questions, because I don't know what you guys really want me to show you how to draw, basically. If you talk about a certain area or something. All right, good to see you. I don't know how to say that either. You guys know these names. Arkasonk. Well, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. And let's see if I can establish, because really that's the other thing. I need to establish which one's in front. So if this is in front, it doesn't really look right by comparison of size. But so yeah, so I'll kind of jump back and forth with the perspective guides, throw a few more rulers in, especially if there's a distance of that I've got to cover with some detail. I'll throw in a few lines like this just to kind of figure out where that perspective is. Shut it back off, zoom in, and then start to detail this area. And again, I'll kind of keep with the architectural style that I have here. So there's some arches, there's some indentations there. Fill in the drop shadows first. Now another trick you can do, I know people frown upon stuff like this, but you can just grab elements and copy them, move them over, and redistort them into place. So that's another little trick if you're working digitally. And that window is too long, so I'm going to bring this line up, try to fix that. Then obviously once something's in place, you can use perspective to find where the next one goes. So just draw that line back, and that'll show you where this other window is going to drop. Draw this line back, that'll show you where these lines go, so on and so forth. Erase back your sketch lines. And then you can think about like little textures of brick. With something this far away, I'll tend to just add in a little bit of texture, but it's going to be like spotty or whatever. I'm not going to really add every little detail of brick from this distance. So I'll just do a little bit of texture here and there. I might shade in the windows. I will say that that's another big part of getting these to look solid or whatever, is putting a fair amount of shadows in place. Like if you don't put enough shadows around certain elements of it, it just won't look as good. I mean, you can do some line work and then come back with color, of course. You'll see a lot of styles where it's very light in shadow, but they know that they're going to come back with the color and really finish it off. Something like that. But yeah, it doesn't really match the other building, that's for sure. So I would either need to increase the size. That's the other thing too, is when you are working in perspective, and again, this is more of a digital trick. I guess you can emulate it in traditional, but as long as you designate the perspective grid, you can change the size entirely of something just by doing this. You can grab it and say, well, this building looks way too small in comparison to that other one. You just cut it, paste it, scale it up, and then just recheck the perspective grid. But generally, if you don't turn it, it'll still land for the most part. But if it doesn't, you can just position it and then distort it. So you go like something like this, and you can pull this right back into perspective with something like this. And these little tools are inside of almost everything now, like Photoshop. They all work a little bit differently, but they're there. So you can really cheat perspective. I'm still trying to figure out a way where I could just draw a bunch of flat buildings and distort them into place. You can do it. I just haven't really got down to refining it. Okay, let me read through these real quick. How to go about adding small people on the buildings. I'm all about tricks. Got to meet those deadlines. Yeah, you gotta take shortcuts when you can to get those deadlines, because it's not easy. I mean, until you work on a book, you obviously have worked on a book, so you know. But as soon as you do, you realize real quick it's not just about having fun when you draw, but being aware of what it takes you to draw certain elements and simplifying when you can. Are you going to add a clock or windows to the buildings? Yeah, that's a good idea. How about making them look decrepit? Just trying to read through a couple of these and see if there's a few that we can kind of combine. Where would you prefer? What would you prefer doing if getting back into drawing? Like where to start? I'm still new to digital art. With digital art, I would say just pick up an app. If you got an iPad or something, start there. If not, you got a computer, pick up a free program. There's lots of great ones. I'm sure everybody here can start commenting and give you some ideas. I think Krita's free. I think GIMP is free. You just want to start with something and go from there. They all can do a lot of what the others can do. You just got to start and then see if it's for you. Sam says, could you make a tutorial sometime about the theory of comic panels? That is, what panel configurations on a page create a certain effect. Yeah, it's a good idea. I've actually wanted to do the one too where it's is it not Kirby? One of the famous guys has 22 panels that are to live by kind of thing that they always work. And I want to do a video on that because it's true. There's a lot of shots that are kind of go-to shots that you want to know and use for comics. So yeah, that's a good suggestion, Sam. I'll get on that very soon. Hey, Keeman, good to see you. Yeah, and that's a good point about zooming out to the panel and making sure that it reads well from a distance. That's kind of the power of thumbnailing. Good call there. Okay, so yeah, so what I'm going to do is, I think one of them was, adding in finer details. One thing I will say about this is like when you're working on a panel like this, or you know, this is more of a pinup, so that's kind of why I was adding more detail to this structure over here, and more in the idea to explain it as well. But the idea is when you're further away from something, you're going to simplify. So, for instance, if you got a character, you know, we've got our superhero up here. Let me see if I've got, bring him back above. Where's that flood layer? Should be below this. Well, I don't know what happened with Sketchbook and they're moving layers around. It's horrible. Kind of regretting that I did this video on this one, but I drew this in Sketchbook because I haven't been drawing in Sketchbook as much lately. But after doing this, I'm kind of regretting. I love the feeling of drawing in this software. It's got one of the most natural and quick ways to draw for me, especially when working on this antique. But God, it's horrible when I'm doing live streams. It's so clunky to move layers around. I don't know why that is. I'll have to figure out if that's something on my part. But so I'm just drawing. I'm blocking in this flood layer because I like being able to draw through the character, but not see the lines. So that's what you see me doing here. Just so you know. I'm just trying to block that in. You'll see it gets rid of some of that background for me. And then as I work on the character, what I wanted to make the point of is that, you know, with this character, I'm obviously going to detail him like crazy, add all this high detail so that he punches up and he's forward on this, you know, he's up front in the shot. And I may or may not add as much detail, or I may not, I'm sorry, I'm not going to add as much detail to the background because I want him to be the main focal point. So for instance, if there's a character, say there's a character, we'll call this a ledge back here. That's kind of what it was supposed to be anyway. So there's this building ledge right here. You know, we do all our little details or whatever. We've got a nice heavy line so it sits out in front of the other buildings. And we want a character standing here on the ledge. We just have to think that the character's not going to be nearly as detailed as Spidey. You know, because unless we're really trying to direct attention to this character, but maybe it's just a character kind of like waving their hands in the air trying to get his attention or something. We'll do something like that. So we have to make this very light in detail, like one leg coming up on the ledge, the other one back. And you're going to simplify a lot in a character like this, even from this amount of distance. You say, let's say Spider-Man is taken up, you know, 80% of the page or something like that, and then this character is only taking up like 8% of the page. So you know, you don't want to get in here and start detailing like crazy, or it's just not going to read well. So what you have to learn to do is simplify. And let's hope this erases right. God, I'm really regretting using Sketchbook. All right, so anyways, let me get rid of the background so we can see what we're doing here. And even that part, oh, that's part of that background. That's fine though. So what I want to do here is simplify. I first need to think about, you know, what the character's positioned like. So we get in the base, you know, structure of the body, the pose, whatever. Keep it very gestural. See, and I'm actually jumping the gun and doing too many shapes. I need to really just keep it gestural because we're not gonna, this doesn't need to be entirely correct. Put it this way, one of the books I've been reading lately that really helped me to kind of think about this more is Invincible. I've been reading Invincible like back to back because it's on Comixology and you can get that little subscription base or whatever, which I need to go out and buy the books too. But anyways, it's a really great book. I'm sure everybody here probably knows about Invincible. I'm really late to the game there, but Ryan Ottley's artwork is very well done. It's very dynamic in parts and simplified in other parts, and I think that's very important to pay attention to when trying to draw comics, because you know we get in the habit of thinking that drawing more is drawing better, and it's not always the case. In fact, his arm is really weird, and he kind of showcases that really well with his art style, because even though some of the areas are very simplified, you can tell he has a great understanding of anatomy, of clothing and wrinkles and scene creation. It's all there. It's all very well placed, and that's what you'll see with somebody if they're drawing simplified and they still know anatomy, they can still make it read well. But if they don't, and this is going to raise funny, it just won't work regardless. You know, like some people I think will go, well, I'll just draw a simplified, basic cartoon style, whatever, until I learn how to draw detailed. And it doesn't always work that way. I mean, I definitely suggest doing that versus trying to draw detailed when you can't draw detailed artwork. But knowing when to simplify is so important for comics. And I think they even make a joke inside the book about meeting deadlines and reusing panels over and over. I thought that was pretty cool because, it was like breaking the fourth wall or something, something you'd see in a Deadpool comic. Yeah, there it is. Wally Wood's 22 panels at work. Thank you. That's exactly it. That's the one I got to do. Yeah, that's going to make for a great video because that's one of those things that you should know. It's like a go-to guide for hey, this always works. The extreme close-up, the bird's eye view, the worm's eye view, and the way they're laid out is very important. Like this character is just really oddly shaped, but we'll just go with it. Fake it till we make it, right? Just get her done. But what I'm going to try to do is fight the urge to detail. I'm just going to get in the basic things, like make a few lines to know he's wearing pants, because it'd be really strange if he was on the roof not wearing any pants. So let's give him pants. We'll do a cutoff, or not a cutoff. That's what I wear. Short sleeve shirt, collar, a couple little wrinkles, nothing too dramatic. And then obviously a very like shocked face, because it looks like he's waving him down to say, "You forgot your donuts." I don't know what he's saying, but he's on top of a building, so it's got to be pretty extreme. Maybe, "Hey, help me. I'm over here, you idiot. I'm the guy you're supposed to be saving." But like even with this, like try to draw this as basic as possible. So big, open mouth, the teeth, tiny hint of a nose, big wide open eyes, tiny pupil, if any pupil at all. I don't even know if you'd see his pupil from that distance, but some messed up hair. But very simplified, maybe some eyebrows. Go my eyebrows, I guess. No, I don't like those eyebrows. I'm going to get rid of the eyebrows. But hopefully you can see that you don't need a lot of information there to make that read. And it's going to read poorly if I try to detail his face, basically. That's what I was trying to get to show you. Even the hand poses, this is why you got to study hands, just the poses, just gestures of the hands. Because you'll have these scenes where you need just to put in some basic hands that look stressed, or, you can convey a lot just with the basic hand pose. And I'm not doing a great job with that, but hopefully you're getting the idea. And proportions are all weird. This leg looks really funky the way it's kicked out. But what I would do is just draw that one more time and just really simplify. So let me just try to show you what I mean there. And, all the time, like looking at the clock and going, okay, this is just a portion of this scene. This can't take me too awfully long. So let me try to just draw through this and see if I can do it. So again, a couple of those little wrinkles. Collar of the shirt. This shoulder should be over a little bit more. I think the other thing is when you get used to making adjustments on the fly, you end up saving yourself a tremendous amount of time. Like you're not redrawing this till it's perfect, because it's just not going to be perfect. But you learn to make some adjustments that make a pretty big difference. Oh, I'm on a floating layer. That's why I can't do that. Little things like, all right, that arm was way too long, so we move the hand back. And always pay attention to in these comics, like how you'll see a hand and it doesn't even look like a hand from this distance. Like fingers are clumped together, but it's still positioned just right where it looks like that hand pose. So again, that's that simplified approach to it so that it reads well. And I think the only way to really get good at this is just practice drawing small. But again, really fighting the urge to detail anything. You see how bad that hand is right there, so I definitely got to edit that sucker. Tilt it. Shrink it down just a hair. Remember that the hand is actually the size of the face, so that's one you could do too. You kind of look at looks kind of funny, but you can see if the hand's about the size of his face. But again, you can't really strive for perfection on this type of area within the work. If you do, you're just not going to meet the deadline, I think. And it's hard for me to really convey to everybody because I don't work on deadlines all the time, so I feel like I'm like kind of misinforming you, but I've worked on a few books, so I can say that a bit, and I definitely had a pretty recognizable deadline for my Learn to Draw Action Heroes book I did for Impact. So I have worked on deadline books, and but not like, some of these guys, it's like that's day in, day out, they're just doing deadlines, and it's like, that's not really my life, but I've done a little bit of it where I can help convey some of that. What this dude's looking like. Well, that's where I'm lucky because I get to draw my own book, and my course content comes out when I complete it. So there he is. He's pretty excited. Something's going on. But hopefully you can see I'm just skipping through parts of it. Like this leg's really oddly shaped, so I'm going to move that. And I need to study wrinkles again because lately I've been struggling on wrinkles. And that's all just about flow and direction, so it just shows me I need to brush up on them. Yeah, and that's pretty bad. So there it is, a really awkwardly drawn guy in the background. So I need to practice on my detailed drawings as well. I halfway expected to look up and there was nobody watching. Okay, somebody says I can't draw hands. Yeah, apparently I can't either. Oh, and I am losing somebody. So I have to go. I'm sorry. I know that was a pretty bad drawing. Okay, would you think that drawing comics is an easier task traditionally or digitally? Also, what would you recommend to a beginner? That's a tough one. I don't think that one's entirely easier or one's entirely harder. Like with digital, it's easier to make edits. So it's definitely easier that way. You don't have to scan your work, and you're faster in a lot of ways because everything's right there on the computer. If you make it that way, you can definitely make digitally harder on yourself, make digital drawing harder on yourself. And then also, there's certain things that you have to get used to. Like if you're drawing an iPad and the screen's a little bit slippery, you got to make adjustments to be able to ink as well as you could on paper. Inking, to me, is easier on paper by far. But if I'm working on my Cintiq, I can ink faster on my computer. So it's so across the board. I can't sum it up with one thing and say traditional is faster, digital is easier. It doesn't really work that way. Traditional is nice because you end up with artwork that you can sell at shows and things like that. Digital is nice because you can do it all in a digital device and have everything collectively right there in front of you, and you don't have to haul around a bunch of art supplies. So there's just pros and cons. I'll need to do an updated video on that. I think I've already got one, but I need to update the video because there's a lot that's changed even in the past few years, really. What else? But as far as a beginner, I would just say mainly create. Just create. Create on paper, create digitally, start with some basic apps, get started, and then go from there. But the main thing is create every day. I oftentimes try to combine what I learned traditionally with what I do digitally. I try to make digital tools work the same way that I use my traditional tools. So I draw on paper, almost like just training myself and keeping myself well versed, I guess. But I definitely try to make each one work the same. So I don't have like a very different method for digital, other than what you saw a moment ago where I was like grabbing parts and moving them around. It's just really easy digitally. All right, so any other questions? And forgive my bad little character sketch there. But the main thing is simplify. And then the other thing is simplify even with the shadows as well. So for instance, this character, you might just fill in the pants all together. You know, big block shadows. You're not going to get in there and detail shadows. You're just going to use big shapes of shadows and things like that. Or you might do something where the information behind them is solid and you just kind of fill that in to make him pop out. So you got to think very simplified in that way. And then if it is bad, like this arm is definitely pretty crazy looking, just fix the most significant thing first, you know, like go for that since it sticks out like a sore thumb, and just improve that one thing. At least that's what I do on most of my work. I'll just go for the thing that's the worst in the shot, the most poorly drawn, and then I'll fix that. And then that way I can try to hurry up and correct it and move on to the next thing. All right, so let's go back to detailing that building, and hopefully I didn't, oh yeah, I grayed that out, didn't I? Oh, thanks, Corey. Just watched that other video. I appreciate that. When's the next stream? You know, I'm not sure. It's probably going to be a few weeks out, but I'll try to get it on the schedule as quick as possible. Just, you know, it's hard to plan these things out right now, but hopefully within the next few weeks I'll do one. I need to do one on coloring because there has been a few requests on that now. So I'll go ahead and do that. But so let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and jump back on working on the character. And if you guys got any specific questions, just ask me and I'll go from there. I mean, or we can draw something else if you guys want to draw something else. Whatever you want to do. Okay, next question was, how would you go about drawing just a small person, like passing by in an office building in one of those windows, without looking like a silhouette or a stick person? You know, I would draw them as a silhouette. I wouldn't, especially the smaller they get. Here, let me show you. Like for instance, say there's a window back here. Where's the background again? So say this is a window here of whatever size. We'll just say this size. If I'm going to draw a person in that window, the main thing is that I want to think about less and less details. So like that previous example of that character, I try to create him with as little detail as possible. That's going to happen even more so here. So you're just going to get like a very cardboard cutout silhouette kind of thing. You know, but the more you practice these, the more they won't look like cardboard cutouts. Again, this is one of those things I need to practice more. Since I'm not doing as much page work as I used to do, I'm actually drawing more pinups. I'm drawing characters larger all the time, and I can tell that's a bad habit because I'm fighting doing what I should be doing here, and that's like drawing a character that's just recognizable with a very basic couple shapes. You know, so you want to basically use a silhouette because there's no way from this distance you're going to see this character and you're going to be able to make out much more than that. So the further away they are, like I noticed some of my favorite comics, I was looking back and studying some panels, and I noticed some of their characters in the background were like this. I mean, they were just like, there was barely arms on them. You could see like a head, a shoulder, and then they do this thing where if it was a shirt, it was a light color, and if it was pants, it was a dark color, vice versa, or whatever. But it was very basic, like this. And like this was an aerial shot, and you could just see these overlapped basic shapes that kind of look like an arm sticking out, kind of look like a leg. The most definable part was the head and the shoulders. So it was kind of funny. I'd never really paid attention to that, but what I was looking at was the character flying up towards the screen. So you got to always think about your focal point. In this case, it's Spidey. Next, it would be, you know, the buildings, and it would go in the range of, like, this building right here would be the most detailed. You know, so you had all this cool detail, all this nice little rendering, cracks in the cement, all that's going to be right here. And you're going to get some of that here if this is a building like that. You know, all buildings kind of have cracks in them, I think. So you had a little bit of that there. But then as you go back, you're going to forego that. You're going to get more shapes of shadows and some detail work, but you're not going to do the tiny little cracks that you see here. You're not going to do that back here, because what happens is if you add them back here, they don't have the same impact here. So, and that's just my particular take on it. There's lots of styles where they probably forego that. But what I'm saying is, you know, think about staging the work and making all your detail where your focal point is, and then working back from there. And I have a hard time with this because I like to add detail, I like to render. The Venom piece that I just did, I showed it on the channel here. I look at it now and I added too much detail everywhere. Instead of letting the detail in Venom be the most impactful and the most detailed, and letting the rest kind of subside and, you know, flow back or whatever, not be so in your face. Corey's saying, does looking at anime help with your being creative at your work? I would say so. I like all art forms, all different styles. I definitely appreciate things about anime that are different than American comics. I appreciate things about even like Disney stuff that I try to implement into my comic work, expressions and, you know, energy of the poses and everything that they do. I think there's something to learn from every aspect of not only just cartooning and art in general, but whether it be toys, whether it be, you know, video games, and just, you know, just life in general. I mean, when I take vacations and I go places, I'm like studying architecture. I just went to Mackinac. I was like looking at the bridge and all that, and just really paying attention to the details because I can use all that, you know, and it's great to relax and let go and then come back and have like some zeal for what you're doing. So yeah, you know, take it all in. Anywhere you can get inspiration and ideas, just always keep your mind ready. Let's see. Drum Solist says, I'm kind of struggling with shots from above that show a lot more of the upper torso instead of the abs and stomach area. So you're saying a downward view, so like a bird's eye view looking down at the character. Yeah, you know, I struggle with that one as well. If you look at the other shot I had up on the screen here, let me get rid of this one. Where is it? Is it that one? Are you talking about a shot like this? Yep, that kind. Okay. So yeah, so what happens here is that it is tricky. One of the trickiest parts of this particular shot for me is where the trap goes, the trapezius. I always seem to mess that up. In fact, I know this isn't even correct. I just did it to where it looks okay. I think anyways, okay for now. But one of the things that happens with the upper body that, you know, becomes tricky is you just really have to compress all that information. So as the chest, I always draw something from the front. So in a very basic way. So let's say this is the chest, the sternum, rib cage coming out, the stomach muscles, however you decide to make these, because there's obviously a lot of variation in the way that people decide to draw this area of the body. V down for the collarbone. So from the front, it's pretty easy, right? It's like pretty straightforward. I mean, it's not rocket science. There's a basic representation of it. But what I'll do is I'll draw that. I'll tell you one thing is just even something like this is to take it and distort it with some, if you're working digitally, I imagine you are, but if you're not, you can still, you can actually do it just by holding the paper differently. But it's kind of a neat little trick just to take it and go like this and see what it looks like prospectively, even though it's not going to be a true representation of it, but it's, kind of some food for thought or whatever. You can kind of take and distort it. Let me see if I can get this right. This one over here, this one back here. So like that. So, distort it into place like this and kind of get this idea, because it does still show you a certain set of things. Like it shows you that the chest needs to be significantly larger, that the ribs have now moved down, to here, and that the abs are at the very lower, kind of quarter or 1/3 of that now, to where before they were over halfway up. So just remember as well that whenever you're doing a part of the body prospectively, that you can define the overall area that it occupies. You can crisscross the corners with a straight, it's got to be a straight line, and that'll give you your halfway point, and kind of see that over here. You can crisscross it again, and that'll give you your quarter, your quadrants. So crisscross up here. You can do this as many times as you need to, but what's neat about perspective is it shows you that, wow, the halfway point's way down here. And the more extreme this perspective is, the more that's going to occur. The halfway point's going to be way down here. And it really helps you to understand that when you're drawing the body that way, that a big part of it is making sure that, these upper portions of the body are occupying the right amount of space. And then obviously you got to think about the curvature as well. You can't draw it flat like that. So you got to, put the curvature in place and then condense down the information. Everything's going to be everything's going to rotate down like this because you're looking downward at it, and they're already downward curves. You can see I did it right there in this part of the stomach, and then past that, it's just doing it over and over again until it makes sense. Studying from life and figuring out how much style you want to incorporate into your version of it. But yeah, like anything else, repetition. The other thing with the shoulders too is I think I talked about this a little while ago, is just really remembering that the shoulders are very independent. They can move, they have a huge range of movement, and yes, they do stretch and connect to the chest, but they can move and pivot all the way around and up. And so a really important part of the body to study, in my opinion, for dynamic characters is the shoulders. I mean, any connection points of the body are very important, but the shoulders are really, really important. Like, it's just, they're a tricky muscle group to get right, and from different camera angles. So just study different pictures and really pay attention to the shoulders and the way they react. Like, one of the muscles that I always seem to get wrong is this portion right here. You can see that, like right there. It's very easy to place this in improperly, and it makes a big difference on whether or not the upper body looks correct. This has to kind of come in front of the chest a little bit from a lot of poses. It's not just like, when you draw a shoulder, it's not just like this one shape like that. It's this muscle right here is actually on a very defined person. It's very large and divided from the other ones. So I'll oftentimes draw that up higher, and then I'll put a little dip right there, and then come down with this side like that. And the bicep would fit in there somewhere. Does that make sense? Don't worry, Rob, I'll teach you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I need all the help I can get. Hey, I'm a constant work in progress. I hope I never impart to you guys that guys and gals that I think I'm perfect or anything. I'm learning every day just like you. OMG, you're alive. Yeah, I'm still kicking. Still kicking. So any other specific questions? We're already running up to an hour and 9 minutes, and I get tired. I need more coffee. I do appreciate everybody popping in and watching these, though. It means a lot to me. It's pretty Pretty awesome. Have you ever started drawing something like a large piece, got so frustrated and had to take a few days away from it? I ask because I'm currently going through it. Yeah. You know, what ends up happening for me is I wish I could pencil, ink, and color everything that I do, and I don't oftentimes. In fact, there's a lot of energy it takes to get through an entire piece right to color, and if it's a very detailed piece. And there's a lot of opportunities through a piece like that where you can look at it and go, I thought this was working out. I liked it better. Now I'm not liking it. Now I want to redraw it. There's a lot that goes on in the mind of an artist, right? So you have to not be your own worst enemy and your own worst critic, as they say. So you got to sometimes just take a breather, like you're saying, take a day or two, come back to it. But you got to be careful as well, because you can lose energy for completing the work like that as well, I've noticed. So I guess it would depend on how you feel when you come back to it. But I actually have to stay into the artwork until it's done, because I may never want to, I want to move on to something else. I'm just very easily, I get distracted, I get, lose energy and excitement for it, and I want to just go on to the next one and try to get better and better and better. So you have to decipher that for yourself. But I would definitely say that don't sit there and be frustrated working on the piece, because it's not going to come out nice. You can't fight an uphill battle like that. Recharge your batteries, go do something you enjoy, come back to it, but don't wait so long to where you entirely lose any motivation to complete the work. Let's see. Can it help, for example, for that shot of Spidey, to think first of the big things in it, like the whole head and neck area? Yeah, I mean, that's what I do. I kind of work on the bigger areas and work back. Like if we take Spidey, for example, I did do that. I do that in a lot of foreshortened poses. So that's not a bad thing. A lot of artists, though, I've heard will say, work on the torso first and then build outward. The main thing that I would say, especially with a downward shot, something like this, is to really think about perspective first. So if it's not occurring naturally in your rough sketch, so you go to rough sketch and you're like, I'm just going to get this down in these broad strokes, gesturally. I got this character like Spidey swinging on his web like that. If you can't get it down like that and make it read somewhat, you know what it is, nobody else has to know, but you get the idea, right? And you know where to go from the next step, then the first thing you have to do is think about perspective. And I just did some videos on drawing this way, because I really think that it helps. Like, draw a box that's perspectively there, tone it back. You can do this with a light table and some paper, and then draw your character, because what it's going to do, instead of just drawing this oval for the upper body, you're going to start to think, well, it's actually going to be like this oval here, and then it's going to taper inward like this. And you're going to think perspectively about the torso almost immediately, because you have this area of influence, this box shape. So then you tend to draw a little bit differently because you're thinking about perspective. So if you're struggling getting these shots, I would say draw more perspective lines and get that initial information in place, so that you hopefully have something to rein you in and pull you into thinking about that if you're just struggling where to put the information. And then lastly, or maybe firstly, I don't know, take pictures. Get your camera out and take that shot of that angle you're struggling with and really study it, draw through it. I'm going to say this almost every time. Don't be afraid to trace. I've heard this from lots of big artists that are, that have made their life in comics. And they're like, they come out and they go, trace. If you have to trace, learn by tracing. Don't always trace. Don't trace for the rest of your career, but learn that way, so that you figure out the shapes of the body and what you're missing. Like, I always struggle to get the leg right. Like I realized it in this piece, and I'm getting ready to draw a bunch of leg poses again. This part where it comes up and the knee is up here, and the knee looks really boxy, and the leg anatomy, it gets really complex right here for me to understand. I mean, I can fake it and get it in the realm of understanding what it might be, but it's not, I'm definitely missing some of the information here as to what goes where. Knowing that, the best thing I can do is go back and study, and if I can't get it just by redrawing this over and over again, I'll study from figure drawing. I'll create some of my own photos. I'll sit there in the mirror and make some weird poses and take pictures, and then I'll draw through it. I'll really study it. Now, it doesn't mean that's what I'm going to end up with on my comic page. I'm going to stylize it for that. But I need to first understand these shapes and the way the muscle works and how it aligns. And what always boggles me is how the knee, the shape it takes right here. And I've seen certain artists, they'll like just say, screw it, and that's a knee, and this is a foot. And they like really animate it or just kind of draw through it. But it doesn't work in my style, so I know I need to study this further. Have you ever done anything on how hips and legs are connected? No, I need to, because that's another one. I think it's very important to dedicate time and studies to the connection points, the shoulders, the hips, the way the ankle turns, the way the hand pivots and from the wrist and turns. Well, actually, the hand doesn't turn, the bones in the arm turn, but the hand looks like it rotates. But it can pivot back and forth, obviously. So a huge range of movement there. The neck, the range of movement from the head and the neck. So I need to do a video that's just specific, or a series of videos that's just specific on those ranges of movement, because they make a significant difference. But again, that's where gesture drawing is so important for figures. Like, I like drawing people that are dancing, gymnasts, sports people playing sports. Those are all great things to study for gestures. And you'll start to pay attention to, how far an arm can really go back, and the range of movement of a leg before it looks weird and things like that. All right, let me read through a couple of these real quick. In digital, would it be easier to draw the figure larger and then shrink the drawing to fit into the window? No, in fact, yeah, I'm glad I read that one. That's not what you want to do. I mean, I have a hard time telling anybody not to do anything, because art is so subjective to the artist, but in the way that you create and the way that you understand things. But I would say that's going to really hinder you, unless you're talking about just drawing a bunch of characters and having them like your own clip art, and then you could just drop them in the windows like that. But if you're going to draw something larger and scale it down for a background piece, you're really gonna cost yourself time. You're gonna spend more time. The idea of drawing things smaller and a little bit more, God, what's the way to put it? You want to make things, certain areas of your artwork, you want to make it where the reader, the viewer, just kind of knows what it is. They kind of figure it out. They kind of assume what it is almost. Not because everything's so masterfully drawn. It's all just kind of placed in the right way, and the composition is there. So you can get away with drawing little people in the background, because once they see the rest of the detail converging to that, it makes sense that those little people are there. You got to think more like that, or you're just going to spend absorbent amounts of time drawing everything in full detail. And that's not, it actually won't even come out better because of that. That's kind of what we were talking about earlier. Like, if there's detail everywhere and it's all consistently detailed in a high def view or whatever, it's actually going to hurt your storytelling. You want focal points to be detailed because it tells the narrative, because it assists the narrative. So that needs to be detailed because it's Spider-Man flying up towards the viewer. The stuff in the background needs to be less detailed because it's meant to be glanced over. So things like that. It's again, there's a lot of ways to interpret that, but I would really recommend that you think more in terms of, how do I get better at drawing things in the background with less strokes? Like, one of the techniques for painters that they do is they say, paint an apple with just like 10 strokes, 10 brush strokes. It's a neat technique, and I would say to do this even with just drawing. It's kind of like with gesture drawing again. You want to really think that way in a lot of areas of your work, because you learn how to be more expressive. You learn how to be more, put down lines with more, what's the word? Focus, deliberate line making. Sorry. I'm definitely needing to pull this so close. I'm running out of brain power here. But yeah, more deliberate line making. So think in terms of that, and again, you're going to save yourself time by doing that. Yeah, I like that comment too. Underlying structure is pivotal. Yeah, and really pay attention to the other comics that you're looking at and reading. I look at comics not like I love reading comics. Obviously, we're all big comic fans. That's why we do what we do. But at the same time, they're like textbooks to me. It's like I actually like Comixology because I can zoom into the panels really well on my iPad or whatever. And I love just paying attention to them and again realizing that some of them are just so gestural or so crudely drawn because it's not the focal point. It's just some background elements and like a car, and you all of a sudden you're looking at this car they drew in the background. You're like, that is a square with two little squares for headlights. Oh my God, I didn't notice that. But with the color and the composition, it works. It makes sense. So yeah, I look at those comics now, and they're not comics, they're textbooks. So really study what other people are doing, and take cues from it. You don't have to copy them. Trace from life, not from other artists. But at the same time, understand what they're doing. Pay attention to it and learn from it because there's a reason they're doing what they're doing and it's working. So, and the devil's in the details. Look at the stuff in the background and the tiny little things that you glance over because you're just reading the book. Think about it like that. Like, it amazes me when you work on these pieces of artwork and then you take them to shows and you put hours and hours into this page, and it's like you're just waiting for people to come up and look at it, and they look at it and they, wow, this is amazing, and they set it down and they walk away, and it's just like, oh, it's just like a stab, But I'm still glad they looked at it. I'm still glad they said it was amazing, but I'm literally counting the seconds that they looked at it. It's like and comparing it to the hours it took me to create it. But c'est la vie. That's life, right? But yeah, so at any rate, I'm going to bring this one to a close. I need to get some food. But I really appreciate everybody tuning in and watching. It's awesome. I can never be thankful enough for all the support of the channel. Remember that I do have that course on Udemy. If you want to learn more about drawing comic book superheroes, you can check it out in the link below. Or my Skillshare classes, which are more like a Netflix of learning kind of thing. But let me know what else you guys want to see. I got some great ideas from this particular live stream. I am going to do some ones on coloring. I got a video coming up. It's just a time lapse that I did, but it's all done in Procreate where I drew a picture of Mary Jane, pencils, inks, and color. That'll be coming up next. I might even get that out today, definitely by tomorrow. And yeah, keep the ideas coming because it always lets me know where to focus my efforts in the future. So you guys are fantastic for that. Yeah, and thank you guys. I see all the thanks there. Really appreciate it. Glad you guys enjoyed the live stream. More on the way real soon. So, yep, that'll bring it to a close. Thank you. Keep drawing. Keep having fun. And I will talk to you soon.